Story 1. Am I the a-hole for canceling a vacation because my wife can't pay her share after helping her adult son and ex-husband? My wife, 44 female, makes quite a bit less than me, 45 male, so our joint expenses are split 70-30. For the most part, things like vacations and where we bought a house are decided based on what she can afford, but there have been several times I've paid in full for vacations to places I really enjoy and wanted to share the experience with her. She has a 23-year-old son from her previous marriage. When she and I got together, I told her I wouldn't mind paying extra for things here and there until her son was 18 and working or in school so she could take care of him. For the majority of our relationship, he has lived with his father. He decided against college or trade school and hasn't expressed any interest in starting to figure out a plan for the immediate future, let alone his life. He floats from job to job, and his father is pretty much the same since the kid graduated. Therein lies the problem. Every few months they'll call her for a few $100 here, a few $100 there, $20 this week, $80 the next. Sometimes it's her son calling for help, sometimes it's her ex-husband. This has caused her to be short on funds for our plans or things she volunteered to cover on more than one occasion. Her reasoning when it's her ex asking is that since their son still lives with him, she has to help him. I get that to a point. We were supposed to go on a vacation later this month. Nothing major or fancy, but just time away. We had agreed to split the cost, and all that was left to pay for were the hotels, rental car, and some reservations. Her ex-husband called needing help getting his car out of impound and getting caught up on rent. Their son hasn't been able to get to work without the car because he doesn't want to ride a bike or take a bus. Almost $5,000 later, they're set up, but my wife told me she can't pay for her portion of our vacation, so I told her I was canceling it. She called me a heartless butt, that she's just taking care of her son, and we've been arguing over it, but my stance is this. They're both able-bodied adults that keep making a series of life decisions that keep them at a standstill, like quitting jobs over little things, smoking, going out. And her always digging them out of their hole is starting to impact our lives more and more, and I didn't sign up for that. Am I the a-hole for canceling our vacation instead of just footing the entire cost myself? To clarify, she contributes 30% of her pay to our joint expenses, bills and utilities, emergency fund, retirement. 70% of her pay she keeps for her personal expenses and to spend or save how she wishes. Dates, vacations, and fun things we choose to do together are budgeted and planned based on what we can afford from our personal funds. Pool that money together, then pay together. So I know this will be a little bit of a rough one because I know there are tons of couples out there that it's just like, hey, whatever money we both make, we're both spending, we're both, like they consider themselves completely and totally intertwined financially, which I think is fine. And I also think it's fine if couples want to have, kind of their own funds and keep track of that stuff. I mean, I think it's whatever works best and is healthiest for you. I don't know that there's one way that's better than the other. I'm sure everyone has their opinions on that. I don't know. And it seems like, they have something that they agreed upon and figured out and she's been okay with. And yeah, like if she's bailing them out to the tune of like $5,000, like I don't know how much these folks are making, but that's a pretty big chunk of change. And when you've suddenly spent like $5,000, it's like, yeah, I don't think that we can afford a vacation after this. Definitely seems reasonable. And I mean, yeah, it sounds like, you'd still have the money to some extent or another, but I don't know. I don't think I could blame this person for just being like, no, if you're always going to be bailing them out and helping them and you're, giving away, $5,000, I don't want to have to cover all of that. I don't know. This feels a little complicated. I don't feel like I have all the information, but the fact that she's kind of going against something that you both seemingly agreed upon makes me want to say that I don't think this person is the a-hole, but I don't know. Other folks might have different opinions. I don't feel super strongly either way on this one. Story 2. Manager tried to take delivery man's livelihood, making him fear for his family's future. Don't worry, I've got your back. Back in the warehouse days, we had an ever-growing clearance section. Because of this, the company employed a delivery driver to be solely responsible for delivering clearance items purchased by customers. This delivery driver, let's call him John, was amazing. He was a veteran of the industry, had 2 trucks, a smaller and a larger one, did most of the heavy lifting, always took the time to chat to me as I helped him load up his delivery run, would bring me beer when it was an extremely hot day, and knew I'd been busting my butt. He had worked for a bunch of high-end furniture stores, but when the recession hit and companies went belly up or cut costs, he found himself struggling for work. The company I worked for had a problem with delivery drivers due to the fact the company was cheap and wouldn't pay the industry rates most delivery drivers charged. John was happy to make a few concessions for cash-in-hand deliveries, and naturally management took advantage of that. After a few problems in the warehouse, I asked John if I could get a few shifts working for him as his delivery offsider. John immediately said yes, as he had problems of his own with lazy employees. I immediately fell in love with the work. We would do a 4 a.m. start to get deliveries on the Watch 6, and if we scheduled it correctly, we could be done by 2 to 2:30. I loved the physicality of it, loved being on the open road, and loved swapping stories with John. He would talk about his wife and kids, and I'd make fun of his tacky scorpion tattoo. The problem started when John would get his delivery run sheet from the store and would see the delivery prices quoted to the customer from the manager. To give you an idea, the store would charge $95 for a local delivery. This was with a full day of deliveries and approximately 20 to 30 deliveries. John would charge slightly more as he was doing maybe 5 to 8 deliveries, and they'd be all over as opposed to all being in a specific area. John would go in and chat to the manager and ask why a customer was only being charged $50 for a 3-seater sofa bed going up 6 flights of stairs when normally it would be a $110 delivery charge and $100 for every flight of stairs past the first level. The manager would just shrug and say she reduced the delivery to close the sale. We'd get other deliveries where we'd have to carry a 10-piece sectional sofa up 7 flights of stairs because the customer wouldn't reserve an elevator, or in some cases, the goods wouldn't fit in the lift. We'd get the sofa inside, unbag it, connect the sections, take the rubbish away, only for the customer to hand John $30 in cash. It was soul-crushing. I remember getting the customer to sign off on the paperwork as John said he'd meet me back at the truck. I grabbed the last bit of rubbish and made my way downstairs and jumped into the passenger seat. John was trying not to look at me. He had been crying. I asked if he was okay, and he kind of broke down a little and confided in me and confused in me that he was struggling with bills, that the company I worked for was his only decent-paying job, that he was getting screwed over by the manager, that he might have to sell his trucks to pay his bills. My heart went out for this guy. He was becoming a fast friend and genuinely loved his job. I began to hatch a plan based on my inside knowledge of the manager, the area manager, the general manager, and the company in general. I took John to a small bar and bought us a few drinks. We sat in a booth and I began to lay out my plan for revenge. I asked John why he didn't give the manager a price list and charge more for his deliveries. John, if I do that, the manager said they'd drop me as their driver and find someone cheaper. I laughed. Me. Call her now and quit. I explained that we had seen the run sheet for tomorrow. We had a massive run, 10 deliveries, and we already knew the manager had quoted ridiculously cheap prices, like $20 a delivery. John wasn't sure. Me. Look, any other contract driver would charge $200 minimum per delivery. There's no way another driver will touch this company. John got on the phone, called the manager, put her on speaker, and quit right then and there. The manager, as expected, talked a big game, she said they'd be better off without John and that he just lost his biggest contract. John hung up, looking sick and panicked. I reassured him it'd be okay. I checked my watch. The store closed at 5 p.m. It was currently 1 p.m. I promised John by 4 p.m. he'd get a call back from the manager. In the meantime, we set about creating a new list of demands, that if they were to employ John, they'd do the following. Charge a per-set price given to them by John, pay for John's off-sider and gas, for any difficult deliveries, balcony lifts, fire escape deliveries, they'd charge an additional fee. If they wanted to terminate John, they'd have to give him the appropriate notice. Sure enough, at 4:30, John's phone rings. Would you look at that? It's the manager. John answers and puts the phone on speaker. The manager, in a much more polite tone, says that if John will do the deliveries tomorrow, she'll offer him a $50 gift card for the store. I hung up the call. John looks at me in disbelief. I tell him when she calls back, you lay out your demands, and that's that. 5 minutes later, his phone rings again. It's the manager. John answers and puts her on speakerphone. The manager starts her spiel, but John cuts her off. John begins listing the problems he's having with the company. At first he's nervous, but then the months of being screwed over kick in, and he lays down the law like a champion. The manager laughs off John's request, and I encourage John to relay the next bit of information to the manager. John, you know as well as I do, no other contract company/contract driver would get out of bed for less than $250 a delivery. For what you're proposing, you either sign off on my demands or good luck tomorrow. Manager, fine, do the delivery tomorrow and then we can... No, I'm coming down there now. You'll sign off on everything, then we will load the truck up tonight and finish the delivery tomorrow. He hangs up. We go to the store and the manager looks peed. She keeps being that John has her between a rock and a hard place and that John is extorting her. I can't help but point out that I'm sure John's kids would like to eat tomorrow. John slaps the new contract he's written up by hand in the truck and says sign it. The manager signs it, and John backs his truck into the warehouse. We notice as per usual it's sofa beds, glass coffee tables, the heaviest item this company sells. The manager walks out to the warehouse and smirks as we struggle to load the extremely heavy goods into the truck. As we finish, the manager has a few snarky parting words. Manager, John, with this new contract, just so we are clear, you have to fulfill the delivery no matter what? Me, no matter what, huh? Manager, even if the customer isn't home, I expect you to make sure the goods are there. I don't want any goods coming back to the warehouse. John, you got it. It was a glorious delivery day the next day. 80% of customers' goods wouldn't fit, as the manager didn't explain to the customers that they had to measure their door frames. We had customers screaming at us, abusing us, saying it was unfair they had to now pay more than $20, and how dare we charge them more. We just laughed and complied with the manager's directive. We left every piece of furniture at the property. Some were in the hallways, others in the middle of the doorways. Some of us just left at the front door as some customers refused to accept the delivery as they didn't want to pay us any money at all. For the nice ones who had cash ready and were happy to pay us for our obvious efforts, we went that extra mile to get the goods in and make sure they had the best delivery experience possible. Update: what happened with John. After I quit my warehouse job and landed a few acting gigs, I finally landed an acting role on a prominent series. Once at the job, I managed to talk to one of the producers about John, and John got a job picking up the sets from the studio warehouse and transferring the sets to the studio. He would then work with the night crew to erect the sets and get them ready for the next day's shooting. I see him around the studio a lot between setups and also most nights when I wrap. He's making great money and is comfortably supporting his family and putting his kids through school. And there's still a good hard-earned beer at the end of the day. Folks, there's an important lesson to be learned from this story, and that is that when you are working for somebody else, be it as a contract worker or an employee or whatever, sometimes for your own good, you really do have to play hardball. Like, you have to sometimes risk a lot, and I've done that. I have been there where I had someone trying to offer me way less for a position than I knew that its starting pay was. Thanks to the person who previously had it. And I had to basically threaten, like, hey, you will pay me what you were paid them, or I won't do it, and you're up a certain creek. And yeah, sometimes it sucks and it's scary, but you know what? More often than not, it will pay off because these people who are trying to screw you over are bluffing. It is only fear, and that's all they have to go off of. And as far as this, I have worked for a high-end furniture store that does deliveries and stuff like that. And I'm sorry, you don't get to, take that money away from the delivery drivers to make a sale. If you're giving them discounts on something, that's coming out of the store's profits, not a contracted delivery driver. The fact that they would do that is absurd. And poor John, seems like just a nice, upstanding guy who didn't feel the need to have a contract to protect himself from that kind of just grossness. So I'm glad that he did get that contract and then still managed to get out of there. And I'm sure that that store, whomever they had to get next, wasn't nearly as nice as John. Story 3, I shot my neighbor's aggressive dog to defend my son/cat, and I am now being sued. Do I have a defense case? My cat was indoor/outdoor, and my 6-year-old son and I were out doing yard work. We live in the country, but we have very close neighbors. Anyway, my son was playing with the cat, chasing it around, when out of nowhere, my neighbor's Great Dane ran up and mauled my cat. And when my son slapped the dog on the back, the dog turned and latched onto his arm really hard and started shaking him to the ground like a police dog. So I ran over, took my handgun, grabbed the dog by its collar to pull him away, and put a single bullet in its head. My neighbor ran out with his shotgun, and I apologetically explained the situation, and he seemed to understand. My brother that lives with us even helped him bury his dog and my cat, which also needed to be put down right there because his injuries were fatal. And the nearest vet is 2 hours away, and I had to rush my son to the hospital. My son needed several stitches and is still recovering from the emotional trauma. Anyway, a week later, I got served papers and am getting sued by the very same neighbor that seemed to understand. Do I have a case? Okay, so, this is a very traumatic story, and I hate hearing about any dog having to be put down or any cat being hurt like that, especially when the dog is a Great Dane, and one of my 2 dogs is a Great Dane, so, this is extremely upsetting, but at the same time, for this person to ask, do I have a case? You have a case to sue your neighbor for not having a dog with violent tendencies, like, in a fenced-in area or restrained somehow. Like, that dog got there and injured your son and gave stitches and basically killed your cat. I mean, the very idea that this neighbor would sue you is mind-boggling to me. It's absolutely absurd. And, I mean, yeah, like, I think if you speak with any lawyer, they're going to be like, why aren't you suing them? We're going to countersue, or whatever the legal terms are. Like, and don't get me wrong, again, I hate that this happened, and I hate that that was the solution, but even I can understand, like, if a dog is mauling your child, especially one as big and strong as a Great Dane, you do what you can to protect your kid. I hate that that's what that came to, but for this neighbor to have the audacity to sue you is unbelievable to me. Well, not unbelievable. Some people suck, and that person very clearly does. And yeah, I hope this case goes in your favor, and jeez. Story 4. College bookstore power-tripping clerk. A few years ago, I was heading to class to take a final in my music history class and forgot a Scantron. I stopped by a college bookstore, grabbed a Scantron, and ran up to the counter. This is when I met her. Her was a mid-50s woman with wrinkles on her face that can only come with holding a constant scowl on your face for decades. When I pulled my card out, she pointed to a sign that said $10 minimum. Yes, $10. The Scantron was about 20 cents. I totally get a $5 minimum, but 10? Come on. Well, I didn't have any change in my pocket, but there was a take a penny, leave a penny jar, so I reached over and grabbed a couple dimes someone was kind enough to leave. Her put her hand over the jar and said, "You can leave change, but you can't take change." At this point, I figured I could either get really upset or play the game she wanted. I told her I understood and that there were a few more items I still needed. I proceeded to go to the furthest corners of the store and pick up about $200 worth of small items from the highest, lowest, and most inconvenient spots in the store. I walked up to the counter with my basket. The entire time, her had a wicked smile on her face like she'd won. Well, as soon as I signed for the items, I told her, "I'd like to return everything but the Scantron, please." She was livid. People don't usually yell at me, but she completely lost it. She ended up calling campus police and the other workers. When the campus police arrived, they informed her that what I did was completely legal. Her couldn't handle it, but had to refund me for everything but the Scantron. Campus police told me with a smirk to please not do that again. I said, "Yes, sir," and headed to my final. I was about 20 minutes late for the final, but ended up making an A. Okay, first things first, that's blowing my mind most about this story is there are colleges that make the students buy their own Scantron test sheets. Colleges! Stop nickel and diming your students so much, okay? That's absurd! I swear to God, there is going to be eventually a college that is going to like charge students for how much air they're breathing or something. This is ridiculous. There are probably colleges now that like keep track of the water you're using in the dorm that you're paying for. I cannot handle this. I don't care if it's only 20 cents. The fact that the school is not just providing these Scantrons is so stupid. I hate colleges so much. At least colleges that do crap like this, and the people in these colleges making these decisions. Every one of them deserves to... They deserve very bad things that I'm not going to say because I'm a calm, rational person. Second, lady running the cashier thing. Why are people only allowed to leave pennies and not take them? It's a take a penny, leave a penny. If you need it, you just take it, okay? Just let the person take a couple dimes. This is... People who do that, why are you so miserable? Why do you want to be such a miserable, awful person? Like, have you tried just being nice to people? Maybe you'd have more friends and your life would be better. Because I promise you, if you're like this as a cashier, you're probably kind of miserable at home and don't have that many friends that want to be around you that much. I'm not saying this to be mean. I'm saying, like, folks, if you just put out this cruel, vindictive, crabby attitude out into the world, that's what's gonna come back, okay? Like, can we please just be a little nicer? Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.